how does a 25-year-old foreign general just walk into one of the oldest, most powerful kingdoms on Earth and convince everyone he's not just their new king, but a living god? I mean, think about that. Well, that's the incredible story of Alexander the Great in Egypt. It's an absolute masterclass in ambition, politics, and religion, all rolled into one. So let's set the scene. It's 333 B.C.E., right after the brutal Battle of Issus, and this quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the sheer ruthlessness of Alexander's war against the Persian Empire. He had just completely shattered the army of King Darius III. This victory wasn't just strategic, it was total annihilation. And right there with him, fighting in the thick of it, was one of his most trusted generals, a guy named Ptolemy. Now, you're going to want to remember that name. At this moment, sure, they're buddies, comrades in arms, fighting for Alexander's glory. But their shared victory in Egypt, it's going to set the stage for a dynasty. Both of these men will end up ruling this ancient land as pharaohs. To really get how wild this whole story is, we have to talk about where Alexander actually came from. See, he wasn't from Athens or Sparta, the traditional heartlands of Greek culture. He was a Macedonian. And to a lot of Greeks, that pretty much made him an outsider. Yeah, this really highlights the contrast, right? While places like Athens were busy inventing democracy and philosophy, Macedon was this kind of provincial kingdom with an absolute monarch. And the other Greeks found that a little uncomfortable. Macedon had rich farmland, which was great for building a powerhouse army, but culturally and even politically, they were seen as different. They'd even allied with Persia in the past, which was a huge no-no for the rest of Greece. But Alexander didn't just pop up out of nowhere. He was standing on the shoulders of an absolute giant, his father, Philip II. Philip was the genius who created that unstoppable Macedonian army, who forced the bickering Greek states into an alliance, and who drew up the entire blueprint for invading Persia. Oh, and he also hired Aristotle to be Alexander's personal tutor. Not bad. So you see, when Philip was assassinated, Alexander inherited this perfect, ready-made empire-building machine. He had the army, he had the plan, he had the veteran generals. Some historians even argue that his first few big victories were really his father's, just won posthumously. Alexander just had to follow the instructions. But this is where Alexander proves he was way more than just his father's son. After that huge victory at Issus, the Persian king Darius offers him a deal, an incredible deal. He says, you can have the entire western half of my empire. A pragmatic king like Philip, he probably would have taken that deal in a heartbeat. But Alexander, he said no. He didn't want half. He wanted the whole thing. So after basically securing half the Persian Empire, Alexander marches his army south towards Egypt. But instead of the brutal, bloody sieges he was known for, he pulls a complete 180. He decides he's going to be a liberator, not an invader. And you know what? He had a massive advantage from the get-go. The Egyptians absolutely despised their Persian overlords, and the reason for all that hatred was mostly religious. The Persians had shown zero respect for Egyptian beliefs. The worst offense? They killed a sacred Apis bull, which to the Egyptians was like killing a living god. Okay, so check this out. This is Alexander's political genius in action. He arrives and does the exact opposite of the Persians. First thing he does, makes a huge public sacrifice to the Apis bull. Then he orders the rundown Egyptian temples to be restored. And he shares power, putting Egyptians and Greeks in charge together. To top it all off, he starts laying the groundwork for a brand new capital, Alexandria. Just like that, he won the entire country without a single fight. Now, to really put this in perspective, when Alexander stood in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza, that pyramid was already 2,300 years old. I mean, that's older to him than he is to us today. He totally understood that he wasn't just conquering some random piece of land, he was inheriting this ancient, prestigious civilization. But just controlling Egypt wasn't enough. To be a true pharaoh, he needed more than just political cleverness. He needed divine authority. And that meant he had to go on a dangerous pilgrimage to become a legitimate, honest-to-goodness, God-appointed ruler. So he sets out on this insane 350-mile journey across a brutal, unforgiving desert to the remote Siwa Oasis. This was the home of the famous oracle of the god Amun, who the Greeks basically saw as their own god, Zeus. This was no casual road trip. It was a life-threatening trek, a real test of his will to get this done. When he finally makes it there, the high priest greets him and leads him into the temple's inner sanctum, alone. So what was said in that room? What question did Alexander ask? What answer did he get? He never told anyone. Not his closest friends, not his generals, nobody. It is one of history's great, unsolved mysteries. But what we do know is the result. Because when Alexander walked out of that temple, he wasn't just Alexander of Macedon anymore. He had been officially declared the son of Amun, a living god on earth, the one and only legitimate pharaoh of Egypt. So you have to ask why. Why go through all that trouble to become a god? Well, there were two really powerful things going on here. On a personal level, his mother, Olympias, had always told him he was descended from Zeus. So he probably deep down believed he had this divine destiny. But politically, it was a masterstroke. As a living god, his rule in Egypt was rock solid, which freed him up to continue his campaigns and conquer the rest of the world. Alexander wouldn't actually spend much more time in Egypt. He had to leave to finish his conquest of Persia and then march his army all the way towards India. But the things he did in Egypt, well, the consequences of those actions would echo for centuries. And this timeline just shows how fast it all happened. Just 8 years after being crowned a god king in Egypt, Alexander was dead in Babylon. He was only 32. His huge empire, with no clear heir, was immediately torn apart by his generals. And who moved first and fastest? You guessed it, his old friend Ptolemy, who went straight for the richest prize of all, Egypt. But Ptolemy didn't just take the land. Oh no, he took the ultimate symbol of power. Alexander's body. He literally hijacked the funeral procession and brought the dead god king back to Egypt. Ptolemy was smart. He knew that possessing the body of his deified former boss was the ultimate key to making his own rule legit. And just like that, the Ptolemaic dynasty was born. For almost 300 years, this family of Macedonian Greeks ruled Egypt. They created this amazing fusion of Greek and Egyptian culture and made Alexandria the intellectual capital of the entire world. It was a dynasty built on the legacy of one man's unbelievable journey from conqueror to god. Which kind of leaves us with one final big question. When you look at his story, was Alexander truly this divine figure guided by destiny, just like he seemed to believe? Or was he simply the most brilliant, ambitious, and calculating politician the world had ever seen? You know, maybe the real truth is he was both.